When my aunt passed away, she left me everything: her house, her savings, her company. My sister-in-law called me a manipulative snake, but she had no idea what my aunt really knew. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I never imagined things would turn out this way. My Aunt Margaret wasn't just family, she was my safe place. She was kind, wise, and had a way of seeing people for who they truly were. She helped raise me after my mom passed away, and she treated me like the daughter she never had. To her, family wasn't about blood alone, it was about loyalty, honesty, and heart. My brother Daniel and his wife, Vanessa, were very different. Vanessa was beautiful, charming, and loved attention. In front of others, she was all smiles and sweetness, but behind closed doors, she could be cutting and cruel. She liked control, of people, of situations, of conversations. She always made me feel small, like I didn't belong. Every family dinner felt like walking on eggshells. Vanessa would find a way to humiliate me, usually with a fake laugh or a harmless joke. If I stayed quiet, she'd call me uptight. If I spoke up, she'd say I was being dramatic. My brother usually stayed silent, caught between his wife and his sister. I stopped expecting him to defend me long ago. Aunt Margaret noticed. She always noticed. Sometimes, after dinners, she would call me over to her house for tea. She'd listen while I talked about work, life, and the quiet ache of being misunderstood in my own family. She'd tell me, "Emily, people like Vanessa only win when you give them power. Keep your heart clean, and the truth will speak for itself one day." When Aunt Margaret fell sick, I visited her often. Vanessa rarely came, only when she knew others would see her. I didn't go for attention. I went because I loved her. We'd talk for hours about her garden, her favorite books, and how she wanted to be remembered. She told me once that she didn't trust easily anymore, but she trusted me. When she passed away, I felt a hole open inside me. I wasn't thinking about money or property. I was just grieving someone who had loved me without conditions. So when the family gathered for the reading of her will, I wasn't expecting anything, certainly not what came next. The lawyer read her words carefully, and I could feel the air tighten around the room. My name came up again and again. Her house, her savings, her company. Everything. I sat frozen. I didn't even know what to feel. Then I heard Vanessa's voice, sharp and bitter, breaking the silence. "She manipulated her," she said. "Emily fooled that poor woman." I looked at her, tears in my eyes, but I said nothing. My aunt had always told me not to fight lies with anger. I just sat there, holding my breath. Growing up, life for me was simple. We didn't have much, but we had enough. My brother Daniel was always the confident one, the kind of person who fit easily into any room. I was quieter, more focused on my studies and small things that made me happy. When he met Vanessa, I thought she was impressive. She had a way of making everyone pay attention to her. She talked fast, laughed loudly, and always seemed to know how to make people like her. Vanessa worked as a real estate agent, and she loved to show off her success. Her social media was full of fancy open houses, expensive dresses, and perfectly posed pictures. She wanted people to believe her life was perfect. When she married Daniel, our family was happy for him. Aunt Margaret even said, "Let's give her a chance." Sometimes people wear a mask before they show their heart. But over time, it became clear that the mask was all there was. Vanessa cared about how things looked, not how people felt. She'd compliment you just to follow it with something that cut deep. She once told me, "You'd be prettier if you tried harder," and laughed like it was a joke. If I talked about my job, she'd smile and say, "That's cute, Emily, but you should think bigger. You don't want to be stuck forever." Every sentence from her felt like a test, and I always failed. Aunt Margaret could see how Vanessa treated me. She never said anything in front of her, but afterward she'd shake her head and say softly, "Don't lose your goodness because of her, Emily. Kindness will outlast manipulation." That line stuck with me. Aunt Margaret lived by it, and I tried to as well, even when it was hard. Daniel didn't seem to notice Vanessa's behavior, or maybe he just chose not to. He was proud of her success and how she improved his image. I sometimes wondered if he even realized how much distance had grown between us. Still, I kept quiet. Causing tension wouldn't change anything. When Aunt Margaret's health began to decline, Vanessa suddenly became more present. She'd visit her, bringing expensive flowers or gifts, acting like the perfect daughter-in-law. Everyone could see her performance, except the ones who didn't want to look closely. I knew she was pretending, but I didn't argue. Aunt Margaret wasn't easily fooled anyway. The day of the will reading felt like something out of a movie. Vanessa arrived dressed in a fitted cream dress, heels clicking on the marble floor, hair perfectly styled. She looked confident, almost glowing. You could tell she believed she was walking into her victory moment. She greeted people like she was already the new lady of the house. Daniel followed behind, more nervous, trying to hide it. I sat quietly, feeling out of place in my simple black dress. I wasn't expecting anything. I just wanted to honor my aunt one last time. But as I watched Vanessa smiling and whispering to Daniel about their future, a strange calm came over me. Aunt Margaret had always seen through people, and part of me knew she wouldn't leave her legacy in the hands of someone who only cared about appearances. Still, I said nothing. The lawyer entered the room with a serious face and a folder in his hand. Vanessa straightened her back, adjusting her bracelet like she was about to accept an award. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of everything that would change. Wondering what truth my aunt had seen that no one else did. The lawyer's voice was calm as he began reading Aunt Margaret's will. Everyone in the room sat still, listening closely. Vanessa leaned forward, pretending to be humble, but clearly waiting for her name. I kept my hands folded in my lap, trying to keep my breathing steady. The sound of paper turning echoed in the quiet room. Then the lawyer said the words that changed everything. I leave my estate, assets, and business shares to my niece, Emily Carter. For a second, I thought I heard wrong. The room went completely silent. I felt everyone's eyes turn toward me. Vanessa's face froze in disbelief. Her smile disappeared instantly. Her mouth fell open, and her perfectly done makeup couldn't hide the rage building under her skin. Daniel looked down, rubbing his forehead like he couldn't process what had just happened. The lawyer continued reading the smaller details, but no one was listening. I could feel the tension getting heavier with each second. My throat tightened, and my heart was beating fast. I hadn't expected anything. I would have been grateful for a letter or a keepsake, not an entire estate. My hands trembled slightly, and I tried to keep my expression calm. Vanessa broke the silence first. Her voice was sharp, shaking with anger. "This has to be a mistake," she said. "There's no way Margaret would leave everything to her. She must have twisted her somehow." The lawyer looked up, but she kept talking. She spent all that time with her just to win her over. She used fake sweetness to get close and then turned her against the rest of us. Her words cut deep. I wanted to defend myself, but I couldn't speak. My mouth felt dry and my eyes burned. I looked at Daniel, hoping he would say something to stop her, but he just sat there, staring at the floor. I could see the conflict on his face, part of him angry, part of him ashamed. I finally said quietly, "Aunt Margaret made her own decision. You know how independent she was." But my voice barely carried across the room. Vanessa let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she did, after you spent months whispering in her ear." She turned to the lawyer and said, "We'll challenge this." She was sick. "This isn't fair." The lawyer stayed professional, telling her that the will was legally valid and that Aunt Margaret had been of sound mind when it was signed. Vanessa didn't care. She glared at me like I had stolen something sacred from her. I could feel tears filling my eyes, not from guilt but from pain. I had loved my aunt deeply. She had been more of a mother to me than anyone else. To hear my family accuse me of manipulating her broke something inside me. I stayed silent because arguing would only make it worse. When the meeting ended, Vanessa stormed out, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. Daniel followed slowly, not saying a word to me. I sat there for a few moments after everyone left, staring at the papers in front of me. My name looked strange on them, as if it didn't belong there. All I could think about was how my aunt had trusted me enough to leave everything behind in my hands. And at that moment, I promised. After the will reading, everything changed. Within days, Vanessa started spreading rumors through the family. She told anyone who would listen that I had taken advantage of a dying woman, that I'd played this sweet, innocent niece, just to get her hands on them. She said Aunt Margaret was confused in her final days, that I had convinced her to change everything at the last minute. None of it was true, but the story spread fast. Phone calls that used to be warm suddenly became cold. Some relatives stopped answering altogether. Others called to check in, but I could hear the doubt in their voices. They wanted to believe me, but Vanessa was loud, emotional, and convincing. She cried in front of them, saying she had been betrayed by her own family. I didn't have the energy to match her drama. I stayed quiet, and in a way that made me look guilty. Daniel didn't help. He said he didn't want to take sides, but by doing that he already had. I could tell he didn't know what to believe. I tried to talk to him once, but he looked uncomfortable and said, "Maybe you should just give her something. You don't need all of it." His words cut deep. He didn't understand. It wasn't about the money. It was about respect, about the truth of what Aunt Margaret wanted. A week later, I met with Aunt Margaret's lawyer to sign some documents. He looked at me kindly, like he already knew what was happening. "You don't need to fight every rumor," he said. "She trusted you for a reason. Don't waste that trust trying to convince people who don't want to listen." His words stayed with me. For the first time, I felt calm. I realized fighting back would only make me look defensive. Silence would speak louder. So I moved into Aunt Margaret's house. It was strange being there without her. The scent of her perfume still lingered in the hallways, and her favorite chair sat by the window just as she left it. Every corner reminded me of her. I spent my days cleaning, organizing, and slowly learning how to manage the estate. Sometimes I'd sit in her garden, sipping tea, and imagine her sitting beside me, reminding me to stay strong. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept pushing. She told the rest of the family that I was hiding out in the mansion, living off money I didn't deserve. But I didn't respond. The more she talked, the clearer her bitterness became. Some relatives started to see through it. A few sent me quiet messages of support, saying they were sorry for judging too soon. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about Aunt Margaret. I wished she were there to tell me what to do. But deep down, I already knew she had prepared me for that. Her trust was her final lesson. I just had to live in a way that proved her faith wasn't misplaced. So I stopped checking social media, stopped answering questions, and focused on building a peaceful life inside her home. Vanessa could have the gossip. I had the truth. And I knew eventually the truth would find its way out, just like my aunt had promised. Myself, I would honor her wishes, no matter what anyone said or did next. Days passed quietly after I moved into Aunt Margaret's house. I kept myself busy by cleaning, organizing her things, and trying to adjust to the silence. The house was large but felt strangely comforting, almost like it was holding me together when I wanted to fall apart. One afternoon, while going through her office, I found a drawer that wouldn't open easily. It was stuck, like something inside had jammed it. I pulled harder until it finally slid open. Inside, tucked between old papers and a stack of photographs, was a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Aunt Margaret's handwriting. My hands started shaking. I sat down slowly and stared at it for a moment before opening. The sight of her handwriting made my chest tighten. The letter began simply, "If you're reading this, my dear, it means I'm gone. Don't let their bitterness dim your light. The truth always finds a way to speak. Use what I've left you wisely, and remember what I discovered about Vanessa before I pass." I read it over and over again. The words didn't make full sense at first. What she discovered about Vanessa, I wasn't sure what that meant. Aunt Margaret was always careful with her words. So for her to mention Vanessa in a letter like this, it had to be serious. Attached to the letter was a small USB drive with a piece of tape on it labeled proof. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt my pulse quicken. I plugged it into my laptop, my hands trembling slightly. It took a few seconds to load, and then several folders appeared on the screen, labeled charity accounts, emails, and recordings. I clicked on the first folder. There were spreadsheets, documents, and transaction records. The numbers didn't make much sense at first, but the more I looked, the clearer it became. Money was missing, large amounts, moved around between different accounts. I recognized the name of Aunt Margaret's Charity Foundation. It looked like someone had been taking money from it slowly over time. I opened the folder marked Emails next. There were exchanges between Aunt Margaret and Vanessa, along with messages to her accountant. Vanessa had been managing some of the foundation's finances, helping organize donations. But the messages showed something else entirely. Vanessa transferring funds into shell accounts under other names. Aunt Margaret had caught her. My heart raced as I clicked on the recordings folder. The first video showed my aunt sitting in her study, her face serious. She was talking to someone off-screen, Vanessa. My aunt's voice was calm but firm as she said, "You've been moving charity money into your personal accounts, Vanessa. I've seen the proof." Vanessa's voice was defensive, full of excuses. She denied it, saying she was just helping with transfers. But Aunt Margaret had already gathered enough evidence. I sat frozen in my chair, tears in my eyes. My aunt hadn't been fooled. She had known the truth all along. The reason she left everything to me wasn't favoritism or manipulation. It was trust. She knew Vanessa's real nature, and she wanted to make sure her legacy was protected. I closed the laptop and held the letter against my chest. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel confused or small. I felt steady. My aunt had seen everything. The lies, the greed, the masks. She had uncovered them all before she passed. And now she had left the truth in my hands. I whispered softly into the... I spent the next few days going over everything Aunt Margaret had left behind. The USB drive had more than I could have imagined. I was still in shock from what I had already found, but I had to keep going. I plugged the USB into my laptop again and opened the folder labeled Financial Record. The first document that appeared was a list of transactions. The numbers were large, too large for normal charity operations. I clicked through more pages, and the pattern became clear. There were transfers of money from the charity's account to an untraceable personal account in a name I didn't recognize. The amount was staggering. My hands shook as I scrolled through the pages. But what made my heart drop was the account number. It belonged to a shell company, one linked to Vanessa's real estate business. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Vanessa had been secretly siphoning money from Aunt Margaret's charity for years, and I had no idea. The money had been flowing out in small amounts at first, then larger sums as time went on. She had been using the charity's good name to hide her actions. I felt sick to my stomach. There was more. I opened another folder titled Daniel's Business. The files were connected to my brother's accounts, and as I looked through them, I saw payments linked to Vanessa's real estate business. She had been managing part of Daniel's business accounts too, and these transactions weren't just small transfers. They were sizable amounts, marked as consulting fees. I had never known any of this. Daniel had no idea what Vanessa was doing with the money. But the most shocking part was yet to come. I clicked on the video folder, my heart pounding as I knew this could be the final piece of the puzzle. The first video was a recording of Aunt Margaret sitting in her office. The camera pointed at her face as she spoke directly to someone out of sight, Vanessa. "You've been stealing from the charity, Vanessa." Margaret's voice was calm but full of strength. "And I have the proof." Vanessa's voice on the other end was frantic. "I'm not stealing. You're misunderstanding. I was just trying to help the foundation grow." But Aunt Margaret didn't back down. "I've seen the transfers, the accounts, the false invoices. You're not helping anyone but yourself." Vanessa's face was tense in the video. She denied everything, but her nervousness was evident. Margaret spoke with such clarity, confronting Vanessa about the money, her betrayal, and how it would all come to light. The weight of the truth hit me hard. Aunt Margaret had known. She had seen the lies, the greed, and the manipulation from Vanessa. She had known all along that Vanessa wasn't who she pretended to be. And that was why, when the time came, Margaret had left everything to me. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. Aunt Margaret hadn't just left me an inheritance. She had left me a weapon, a way to protect the legacy she had worked so hard to build. Vanessa had underestimated both of us. My aunt had seen the truth, and now it was my turn to make sure the world saw it too. "Quiet room. I'll protect what you built, Aunt Margaret. I promise." I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about what Aunt Margaret would have wanted me to do. The evidence on that USB drive could destroy Vanessa completely, but it wasn't revenge my aunt had taught me to seek. It was truth. She always said that the truth has its own way of setting things right. So, instead of confronting Vanessa myself, I decided to let the truth speak for me. The next morning, I made a copy of the files and sent them quietly to Daniel's accountant and Aunt Margaret's lawyer. I didn't include any message or explanation. I just attached the documents, the transaction logs, and the recordings. I knew once they saw the details, they would understand everything. I didn't need to raise my voice or make accusations. The facts would do all the talking. Days went by, and I tried to live normally. I kept working around the house, organizing things, and staying quiet. Then one evening, Daniel called. His voice was tight, almost shaking. "Emily," he said, "we need to talk." I could tell by his tone that he had seen the evidence. He didn't sound angry this time, just confused and hurt. He came over the next day. The moment I opened the door, I could see it in his eyes. The man who once defended Vanessa's words now looked like someone who had just watched his whole life fall apart. "You knew?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Aunt Margaret left me proof," I said. "I didn't want to use it unless I had to." He didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat down and put his hands over his face. Over the next few weeks, everything started to unravel for Vanessa. The accountant had forwarded the files to investigators, and soon enough, the charity's missing funds became a public issue. Reports came out about embezzlement and financial fraud. Her name, once respected in real estate, started appearing in headlines for all the wrong reasons. Clients pulled out of deals, and her business started falling apart piece by piece. Vanessa tried to deny everything at first. She claimed she was being set up, that someone had framed her. But the paper trail was too strong, the transactions too clear. Every number, every document, every signature led back to her. There was no way to escape it. Daniel tried to stand by her in the beginning. I could see him struggling, torn between love and truth. But as the evidence grew heavier, he couldn't defend her anymore. One night he called me again, his voice heavy with sadness. "You were right," he said softly. "All this time, I thought you were jealous or trying to cause problems. I was wrong. I didn't feel proud. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt tired. I had spent years being treated like I was less, and now the truth had spoken. I didn't have to scream or fight. Aunt Margaret had already done the hardest part. She had seen the truth and trusted me to protect it. Watching Vanessa's world collapse wasn't satisfying. It was just sad. She had built everything on lies, and in the end, those lies swallowed her whole. It was late one evening when I heard loud knocking at the door. At first, I thought it might be a mistake, but the knocking got harder, almost desperate. When I opened the door, Vanessa was standing there. She looked nothing like the polished woman I had always known. Her hair was messy, her eyes were red and swollen, and her clothes looked thrown together. She was breathing fast, anger pouring out of her. "You ruined my life," she shouted the moment she saw me. "You think you're so innocent, but you destroyed everything I built." Her voice cracked as she spoke. I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there, holding the door slightly open, watching her pace back and forth like she couldn't control her emotions. I had imagined this moment before, but it didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no sense of victory or satisfaction, just an empty sadness. Vanessa kept shouting, saying that everyone had turned against her, that Daniel had left, that the media had ruined her reputation. I worked for everything I had, she yelled. You took it all away from me. I finally spoke, keeping my voice calm and steady. You did that yourself, Vanessa, I said quietly. Aunt Margaret saw it first. I just let the truth finish the job. She froze for a second, staring at me as if she couldn't believe I had said it. Then she laughed bitterly, shaking her head. You think you're better than me? She snapped. You think you're some kind of saint? You were always jealous of me. Her words were wild, her voice uneven. It was like she couldn't decide if she wanted to fight or cry. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Everything had already been said, everything already proven. I had spent months trying to stay silent, trying not to add more pain to the situation. But now, looking at her, I saw what Aunt Margaret had seen long ago. A woman so consumed by her own lies that she couldn't tell truth from fiction anymore. Vanessa's anger slowly turned into tears. She sank down on the porch steps, covering her face with her hand. Everyone hates me now, she whispered between sobs. Daniel won't even look at me. Her voice sounded smaller, almost like a child's. I stood there watching her, and for a brief moment, I felt sorry for her. Not because she was innocent, but because she had done this to herself. She had built her whole life on greed and deceit, and now it had all come crashing down. I never wanted this, I said softly. All I ever wanted was peace. She didn't answer. She just kept crying, mumbling things I couldn't understand. After a moment, I quietly stepped back and said, You should go home, Vanessa. I closed the door gently, my heart heavy. Behind the door, I could still hear her sobbing, the sound fading as she walked away. I leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. There was no joy in any of it, just relief and sorrow mixed together. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, I thought about family and how easily love could turn into bitterness. Vanessa's downfall wasn't something I wanted. It was something that happened because truth always finds a way to surface. I didn't destroy her. She had done that herself. And as painful as it was, I knew closing that door had been the only way to finally move on. Did was let the truth come to light, just like my aunt wanted. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel calm again. The chaos that had surrounded Emily finally faded, leaving quiet mornings and peaceful nights in its place. She no longer felt the constant tension that had once followed her everywhere. Instead, she started focusing on what really mattered, honoring her aunt's memory and building something meaningful from everything that had happened. Emily decided to use part of the inheritance to expand her aunt's charity foundation. It had always been close to Margaret's heart, helping single mothers find homes, jobs, and a chance to start fresh. Emily wanted to make sure that work continued. She spent long days meeting with local organizations, improving programs, and personally visiting women who came to the foundation for help. Watching their lives change gave her a sense of purpose that money alone never could. The more she gave back, the lighter her heart felt. She realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain, but about turning it into something good. Her aunt had always said that kindness outlasts manipulation, and now Emily truly understood what that meant. By helping others, she was also helping herself heal. One morning, Emily received a message from her brother, Daniel. It had been months since they had last spoken. He asked if they could meet for coffee. Emily hesitated but agreed. When they met, Daniel looked different, tired, remorseful, and sincere. He took a deep breath before speaking. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I was blind to everything Vanessa did. I believed her lies, and I hurt you because of it. I should have protected you instead of doubting you. Emily listened carefully. She could see how much guilt weighed on him. For a moment, she remembered all the pain his silence had caused, but she also remembered the way Aunt Margaret always taught her to choose grace when she could. I forgive you, she said softly, but I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean going back to how things were. It just means I'm letting go of the hurt. Daniel nodded, his eyes wet with regret. I understand, he said. I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you, for what you're doing, and for how strong you've been. They parted on peaceful terms, not as close as before, but no longer enemies. Emily knew some relationships couldn't be fully repaired, and that was okay. Setting boundaries didn't mean she didn't care. It meant she finally respected her own peace. Over the next few months, the foundation continued to grow. Emily's team helped dozens of families rebuild their lives. Whenever she walked through the new office, she felt her aunt's presence there, quiet but strong, guiding her just like before. Sometimes, late at night, Emily would sit by the window of her aunt's old house, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. She thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the loss, the truth, and the healing that followed. Life hadn't been easy, but it had shaped her into someone wiser and more grounded. She had learned that peace doesn't come from revenge or validation. It comes from knowing you did what was right, even when no one believed you. And as she looked out into the night, Emily smiled softly, knowing that her aunt's legacy and her. A year later, the air around the house felt different, calmer, lighter. The pain that once lived in every corner had faded into something gentler, something peaceful. Emily sat in Aunt Margaret's favorite garden, the same spot where they used to drink tea together on quiet Sunday morning. The flowers had grown fuller since she took over caring for them, and the soft hum of bees filled the air. Beside her stood a new plaque mounted on a stone base. It read, "In loving memory of Margaret Carter, proof that love and truth always win." Every time Emily looked at it, she felt warmth in her chest. It wasn't just a tribute to her aunt. It was a reminder of everything they had both stood for. She sipped her tea slowly, thinking about how far she had come. The chaos, the accusations, the heartbreak, it all seemed so distant now. She had spent months rebuilding her life, running the charity, and helping people who had faced struggles of their own. In doing that, she had also rebuilt herself. The foundation had become more than just an organization. It was a symbol of hope and strength, a reflection of everything her aunt had believed in. Sometimes, people still whispered about the inheritance, about the scandal that had once surrounded her family. But Emily no longer cared. The noise of other people's opinions no longer carried weight. She had learned that peace didn't come from proving anyone wrong. It came from knowing the truth and living by it. Daniel still called occasionally. Their conversations were short but sincere. He had started over, too, working hard to rebuild his business and his life. Emily didn't blame him anymore. Everyone had paid their price in one way or another, and she knew that forgiveness was the only way forward. As for Vanessa, Emily hadn't heard from her since that night at the door. Rumors said she moved away after the investigations ended, trying to start fresh somewhere else. Emily didn't wish her harm anymore. She just hoped Vanessa learned something from what happened, that lies and greed never truly lead to happiness. Sitting there in the garden, Emily finally understood what Aunt Margaret had meant all along. Kindness wasn't about being naive or weak. It was about staying true to yourself even when others tried to tear you down. It meant standing firm without turning cruel, and walking away from hate without losing your heart. She realized that Aunt Margaret's final gift wasn't the inheritance, the house, or the money. It was the strength to face betrayal without letting it change who she was. It was the wisdom to choose peace over revenge, and to keep her dignity even when others had none. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft gold and pink, Emily felt a deep sense of closure. She smiled softly and whispered, "You were right, Aunt Margaret. Love and truth always win." The wind rustled through the flowers as if answering her. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by beauty and peace, Emily knew her aunt's spirit would always be there, rooted in the garden, alive in the charity, and forever within her heart. Own strength would continue to shine long after the pain had passed.